soon. Enjoy the podcast.
Way of Will John.
You know, I have a huge fascination with all of these things, and you do great research and you explain things excellently, which is half of the success of the people that I follow is that they do an excellent job at researching, understanding, and internalizing a subject, and then they're very good at explaining it because I found that to be the key for people building followers. You know, is this essential ability to express an idea and make it simple. And so, in any case, listen, Jason, thanks for being here. How you doing?
Man, I'm great. I was pretty excited when Big John told me that, hey man, there's a guy. Because John and I have been watching a bunch of Manchester United. We've been running sports predictions using date sequence predictive analytics. So I didn't know anything about international football. I didn't know anything about soccer.
No way.
We've already wrapped the algorithm around NFL, and we're presently doing NBA. But soccer is international, and we noticed that the bet centers in Las Vegas, they focus a lot on the soccer. So we're in beta testing right now, and we've involved the entire Archaix community in the beta testing. So we were really interested in the soccer because of its demographic. It's not like NFL and NBA, which are hypercentric to the United States, Canada, North America. Soccer is international. It's a phenomenon. So this is what we're doing. And when I found out that I was going to be interviewed by somebody who has a background in international soccer, I was like, wow, you know what? I got to do this video. I got to do this podcast.
There you go. Synchronicities, man. They're everywhere. And so give us a little bit of a background. I mean, your background is exquisite. Now, I have seen a lot of your videos, and which is one of the main reasons to reach out. And like I said before we got going, we've been trying to make this happen for some time now, so I'm really happy we can. But could you give, and by no means hold back if you want to go and give the extended version of your intro, because your origin story is epic, to say the least. So maybe you could bring us through that.
Well, I've said it in different degrees so many times. I'll just give it to you as fast as I can. I was adopted out of a very bad situation when I was 5 years old. And for 10 years, I lived with the Breshears family. My name is Breshears now, but it's not my birth name. My birth name was Durant. So I was adopted into the Breshears family. I stayed with them for 10 years until I was 15 years old. During that 10 years, I was under a puritanical mother. My adopted mother was a church administrator. She was very strict, and I have to give her credit, even though at 15 years old, she's the reason I ran away. But I have to give her credit for my literary achievements, my academic, my publishing achievements, because I had to go to church 5 times a week. And although I'm not religious today, that upbringing was an upbringing of intense reading and scrutinizing what I was reading. And I was allowed to go to the public library once a week, but I always had to read whatever she picked out for me. And as a reward for reading the book she picked out for me, I got to read my science fiction. I got to read my fantasy. I got to, the Chronicles of Narnia, the Lord of the Rings, Star Wars novels, whatever. I was allowed to pick one book a week for me. This went on for 10 years. So by the time I was 15 years old, I lived on the streets for 2 years in carpentry and in roofing, and I was supporting myself. And then at 17 years old, I hooked up with a buddy of mine that I went to school with I knew him when we were 13, 14, and 15. And his name was Joey Renesto. His real name is John. But Joey had gone full criminal. I had not seen him in like a year and a half. And I hooked up back with him when I was 17. And we were doing some odd jobs together, but they were legitimate jobs. And then we just started doing dumb shit that teenagers do. And one night got out of hand, and I went to prison at 17 years old. And my initial charges were aggravated kidnapping and aggravated armed robbery. But 9 months later, they changed my indictment because I had told the truth about what had really happened, even though John and the victim didn't tell the truth because neither one of them wanted anybody to know what happened. my own upbringing causing me to, hey, you know what, always tell the truth, had really started a huge investigation because there was a multi-million-dollar lawsuit involved in my prosecution because we had carjacked this 19-year-old girl. We were both 17, but we carjacked her from a secure parking lot. It was the Galleria in Houston. So C-Tech Securities, the Marshall Fields, and the Galleria got involved, and they got sued for millions behind this. And this exacerbated my prosecution. Now they needed some fall guys because our original deal was 90 days boot camp. But then this lawsuit and this litigation came up, and you know, it's all water under the bridge. I don't even care anymore. As a matter of fact, I'm proud of my prison upbringing because of what I accomplished in prison.
TheWayOfWillJohn.com, exclusive content and programs on manifestation, making money, hidden knowledge. Finally, reach your full potential.
So at 17, I go up the river. I'm only supposed to be there for 7 years. But in Texas, we had a new guy that became governor, and you know who he is, George Bush, who later became president. And one of George Bush's first acts as governor is to retroactively apply parole laws, which everybody told him was illegal. You can't do that. But George Bush went on record publicly, and anybody can Google it and see, where he went on record and specifically said, I think it's about time that we reinterpret what we can and can't do about the U.S. Constitution. So he retroactively applied a bunch of laws about parole, and suddenly, at 24 years old, right when I'm coming up for parole to be released on good behavior, he had new laws put in place to retroactively apply parole, and now my expected 7 years turned into 15 years. He doubled the amount of period. This is right when I'm about to get out. You can imagine what a 24-year-old who had just spent 7 years in prison, how they would react. You can imagine that. I don't have to tell you. And that's exactly how I reacted. And I got a lot of major disciplinary. And I've showed my community my disciplinary records. I've got videos where I show my prison history, and I show all, I'm not proud of it, but I got involved in a lot of stuff. I mean, you thrust a kid into an all adult environment. It's not a good recipe. So Texas prison in the 90s was nothing but a place of violence. I mean, the prisons I was at were all maximum security, and we had Maury Povich there, Marvin Zindler. We had big names coming to interview prisoners, asking why are y'all killing each other? What is going on here? Why all this gang violence? So in the midst of all this, after the 7 years, and I realized, damn, I got to do 7 more just to come up for parole. And that's not even guaranteed, because if they can retroactively apply those laws one more time, well, they can do it again and indefinitely keep me here. If the Constitution is no longer a prohibition against tyrants just creating laws for political gain, then I'm probably never getting out. So when I adopted this attitude, I started doing prison time my way. And I don't need to go into detail about that, but I didn't see an exit. But the entire time I'm in prison, I haven't lost my interest. I'm still reading, I'm still researching, I'm going through my Bible. I'm reading Genesis to Revelation twice a year. I'm going through the entire Bible twice a year. I'm reading all these other books, and it was around 1999, before the Y2K deal, that I came into contact with David Icke. And I read a book by David Icke called Children of the Matrix. It's the first book that led me into other areas of research. And then William Cooper, Behold a Pale Horse. Tex Mars. I read a bunch of Tex Mars books. This opened my eyes that, man, there's a world much bigger than the world that Christianity has painted for me, the world that my mother molded me into. And I started reading all these nonfiction books. So I ended up not because of the state, not because of the retroactive laws. It is entirely my fault. I could have got out after 14 years or so. But I had been to maximum security, closed custody, administrative cell restriction, involved in riots, involved in all kinds of chaos in prison. I had totally become immersed into prison culture. But at the same time, I'm also doing my research. I'm doing my homework. And in 2004, a magazine named Paranoia picked up one of my articles, which gained the attention of a publisher who has never contracted with a convicted felon ever and hasn't since either. But this publisher has already published 5 of my books and is about to publish a 6th. My first 4 publishing contracts from Booktree in San Diego were as a convicted felon. As a matter of fact, I got called out to the major's office and captain's offices, and I got to talk to wardens and chiefs of classifications and GIs, gang intelligence officers, OIG, Office of Inspector General. I got called out by all these people because they were asking me. They were really worried that I was going to use my writing abilities to expose things that were going on in prison. And when they realized and they saw my manuscripts that all I'm interested in is antiquities, and particularly chronology, I noticed that there was a dearth in academia, that there are no chronologists alive today. All the last ones were 200 and 300 years ago. I knew that there was a niche to fill, and they didn't think that they didn't think I could do it, and so they didn't care. They didn't stop me, and I had to cite case law. I had to cite Fifth Circuit existing case law in Texas tort law, where it was shown in Texas courts that administrative authorities cannot stop a convicted felon from entering into contract negotiations and contracts with free world publishers. So when all this red tape was cut through, I ended up getting 4 publishing contracts while I was still serving time in prison, and I was publishing things that most people had never seen before. My bibliographies are very unique because of the information I came into contact with in prison. Most people don't know that prisons aren't going to spend a lot of money on inmates' libraries and education. So they get their books donated when old colleges from 150 years ago go down, get condemned. Those libraries and those old colleges in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, we're talking about high schools and colleges from the 1800s. When the new prison system came up in the 1910s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, the Bonnie and Clyde era, all their libraries were filled with books from all these older institutions. And the whole time I was in prison, I never thought it was really amazing that we had all these books from the 1800s in our libraries. We had all these books from all the way up to 1945. And I spent my life, over a quarter of a century. I ended up staying in Texas prison for 26 years and 42 days. 17 years old, I got out at 43. So I got out, though, with an education that very few people can ever boast, because I didn't have hobbies. I didn't have a job to go to. I didn't have a family to take care of. There weren't other things in my life that were redirecting my attention elsewhere. All I did was read books, data mine them, extract the information I need, organize that information, and the process of writing information that is first read. It's like some type of spiritual alchemy. You can read information, but you don't really know it. You really don't have it, and you can't really synthesize it with everything else you've come into contact with. But once you've written information down, it becomes part of your field. It becomes something that you never lose, and you can almost always recall it. And this is one of the reasons why my channel has exploded in 4 years. I have this almost instant recall for sources, source citations, the books, authors. In all my presentations, I'm always telling people where I got the information, what these authors were saying. And a lot of times these authors aren't known to the general public. These are men who were amazing researchers in the 1700s and in the 1800s. Men who wrote profound books at the turn of the 20th century, in the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s. About 95% of all the data that I've ever divulged on YouTube comes from pre-World War II material, because it was after World War II when all the publishers of the world were basically a captured operation, and they were only putting out a certain narrative, and a lot of the things that were taught before the world wars had fallen off the syllabus.
One of the most important things that I have learned interviewing all of these high performance leaders is that clarity of mind is crucial to your success. And what good is clarity of mind without clarity of sound? Which is why today's podcast is sponsored by Rode. We across Golarami use exclusively Rode audio equipment in order to do all of our stuff. If you are an influencer, if you're just a person out there trying to make some good content for your stuff at home, wherever it is, Rode is by far the best audio partner we have ever had. We have been using their stuff for almost 5 years now. Has never let us down. Truly incredible company, especially with all of the other affordable things that you guys can get from them. Check out the link right down below and enjoy the rest of this podcast.
There was no mention of these empires, these social institutions, these archer and these mason and these hunter guilds that were running the world. This East India Tea Company that was actually an intelligence operation. The Greek oracles which were nothing fantastic about them. There was a massive intelligence apparatus spread throughout Turkey, going into Greece, into Rome, into the Roman Peninsula, all the way to Sardinia, and wrapped around where it began all the way in North Africa. This massive intelligence operation that had the general public fooled into believing that oracles and they were telling the truth, and they weren't. They were just dispatching the most recent information by ship and by runners everywhere. In fact, the oracles of the ancient world are the origin of the Olympics. These runners had these parcels full of data from ships that just came offshore, and every ship captain knew how to make his silver. He knew that there were agents among the harbor masters that you could go talk to, and you could say, hey, I got some really intriguing news from Ionia. There's all kinds of stuff going on over in Miletus right now. You might want to know. It's just right across the way. And Miletus was a major fleet exporting engine, meaning if you were a people oppressed in the ancient world and you needed to get your people away from a certain situation, you could go to the shipping guilds of Ionia. And there's any number of shipping guilds you can contract with, and right then and there, they had fleets of ship that would take all your people somewhere along the Mediterranean somewhere, and they would build for you a colony and transplant your people, and then every year, money that you made in that colony would go back to Ionia. This is a huge operation. This is how so many colonies became countries later on. So I started documenting all this, and just so we can get to some specific questions. What got me really popular was that I didn't come to social media empty-handed. I wasn't a YouTuber trying to find interesting topics by looking at other YouTube videos and then putting my own spin on it. This is about 90% of the content out there. So this isn't what I did. I had already written 17 or 18 books. I already had 13 published books before I ever started a YouTube channel. I had a wealth of information that most people had never even heard before, because I had the ability to go through these old libraries and these old books. I've literally studied books that were at Eastham Prison in Lovelady, Texas, the exact same library that Clyde Barrow had access to, the famous Bonnie and Clyde case. He was there. He may have read some of the books I read while he was in Eastham Prison for a couple of years. But it's a shame, because in 2016 I was released from prison, and by 2020 they had done away with the old libraries in Texas, and now prisoners have tablets, the ultimate form of censorship. Now they all have tablets. We didn't have any tablets when I was in prison, but now they all have tablets, and they have a certain syllabus of books that they're able to read, and most of them are fiction. What I accomplished could never be done again, at least not in Texas prison. You just can't. I was in prison the perfect amount of years to do exactly what I've done. And I was able to data mine 26 or 27 bags full of information during this time that my dad saved for me. I told the story on YouTube a few times, and my dad's been in the chat many times, but the reason I have all this data is because my dad once a month would come to the prison. Sometimes my sister or my brother, but somebody would take the whole bag of research notes, take them home, and all those years, over 2.5 decades in prison, I always stressed, am I ever going to see my research again? So I would send all this home, and I had a pretty emotional breakdown when in 2016, in the month of December, I was released from prison. And my dad loves to tell this story, but they offered to take me to a steakhouse. They offered to do all kinds of things. As soon as I was released from Huntsville, I wanted to go. I told them straight, take me straight home. Just take me straight home. I don't want to go anywhere else. And I went up in the attic, and every single bag was there, and it was surreal. It took me over 14 months to organize all those notes to be able to start doing presentations from. Anyway, that's pretty much my story in a nutshell.
It's so epic. I mean, I could hear it 50 million times. To be perfectly honest, one of these times when we do something in person, I would love to go into detail onto how you've done what you've done. And so I've got some interesting questions here, some that I haven't heard you speak on, but because you've done such a great job in specializing and focusing on chronology, I want you to give us, as best you can, a good understanding of where we have it wrong with regards to chronology. I know you've made videos on this, and I know we don't have nearly the amount of time that you've put into those videos. But if you're trying to, I don't know, maybe convince is the wrong word, but at least let's say make aware someone who's never understood that there could be gaps in our history or an incorrect telling of our history or censorship, even with the way in which the story we're told, right? Could you give us a good understanding of what we've got wrong and where the narrative is off and what you believe to be the proper narrative of the chronological history of Earth, humans, etc.?
Okay, well, this year, right now, is the year 5919. This doesn't mean the world is 5,919 years old. It means that in the old world Anno Mundi system, which the original Freemason lodges used, they used the Anno Mundi system before they ever developed the Anno Lucius system. Take a step back. For those who don't know, Archaix, my brand, is an acronym, and it's Advanced Research of Chronological History of Artificial Intelligence X. My research began with the study of ancient calendars, ancient day count and timekeeping systems, and it was through this analysis that I made several discoveries about the history of the world, the unfolding of mythology, what these myths really meant, how these calendars act as ciphers, how these calendars are fixed in the field, and that we can navigate history forward and backward using these calendars. In 2011, I had a book published called Anunnaki Homeworld. And in that book, I set out to correct Zechariah Sitchin's Earth Chronicles because he made some critical errors. And one of the greatest errors that Zechariah Sitchin ever made was copying the same mistake that the Babylonian historian Berosus made in 2060 BC, where he claimed that a Shar was 3,600 years. This was a complete misunderstanding, and that Zechariah Sitchin used Berosus as an authority is pretty embarrassing, considering the fact Berosus was actually Greek, and the Shar is a Sumerian measurement of time that was already in disuse by 16 centuries before Berosus ever wrote about it. So the mistake crept in before Berosus. But the reason for the mistake is because the world that existed when the Shar count system was being used doesn't exist anymore. We don't have that world anymore. As a matter of fact, that world, which knew no sun, it doesn't mean the sun wasn't there. It means it knew no sun. Because just like Genesis, the book of Genesis gives us a window into that area. And it talks about a vapor covered the ground every morning and watered all the herbage and provided so much moisture it filled pools of water. But at nighttime, the vapor became a firmament above at night. It magnified the stars. This is why in almost all the Native American traditions, the Inuit traditions, ancient Mongolian traditions, Southeast Asian traditions, we have these stories that the ancients believed if they could find a hill or a mountain tall enough, they could reach out and touch the stars. And if it's real quiet at night, you can listen, you can hear the stars singing. There was a period of time when the stellar traditions were the only traditions, and the only zodiacs that existed were lunar zodiacs. No one had ever even thought or conceived of a solar zodiac. It doesn't make sense to have a solar zodiac because when you go outside today and look up at the sky, the sun obscures your view of the constellations. What use or what utilitarian value would a solar zodiac have? So we have many misconceptions today about the ancient world. And it's because we transpose things that are factual today upon upon the template of the past. When it doesn't agree, it doesn't fit. And what I'm saying is we had a vapor canopy world in the ancient past. We've had vapor canopies a couple times since then as well. And there's proof of this in the fact that we have maps of Antarctica absolutely ice-free. The very existence of maps from the 15 and 1600s that show Antarctica's mountains, valleys, and rivers in the exact areas that the U.S. Geological Service has found in subsurface interface radar. The reason these maps are absolutely accurate is because in very recent antiquity, cartographers mapped Antarctica. So it couldn't have been in 10,000, 12,000 BC like Graham Hancock, Zechariah Sitchin, Billy Carson, and a lot of other people have espoused. There is no way that any type of cartographic evidence would have ever survived copies of copies of copies of copies of copies of copies through resets, through cataclysms, through earthquakes, through tsunamis, through shipwrecks, storms. None of that. It's just mathematically improbable, just like it's mathematically improbable for a man to live 500 years. In a 500-year period, you would have died by accident at least 10 times. This is how the math adds up. So the Char count system, was simply exactly what it was described in the ancient world, a star count system. And the ancients counted how many turnings of the dragon there were. Like today I'm like 18,940 Chars old. That's how old I am. This is why on the Sumerian king list, the Sumerian king list is 241,200 Chars, but it only lists 8 kings. Well, 8 kings, if they live 241,200 years, like Billy Carson and Zechariah Sitchin espouse, well, that means each king ruled for about 48,000 to 60,000 years. It's absolutely untenable because these kings are spread through 3 dynasties, and there's no way that a dynasty, not even a stone city like Bad Tabira, Larak, or Shurapat could have ever survived that time. There must be a misunderstanding here, and we know there's a misunderstanding. I didn't have to make it up. In my own research, I cite all the ancient historians who corrected Berosus. So it's a real shame that Zechariah Sitchin didn't quote any of these ancient authors. I have quoted them, and I have so many facts. You would not believe Archaix is one of the most fact-checked channels out there. There are people dedicated to just trying to find me slip up on a fact. That's all they do. That's all they live for. That's all they do is try to find me misquoting a source or a citation. Yeah, there's hundreds of them all fact-checking me. So anyway, the Char was a day. Just like in the book of Genesis, the evening and the morning was the first day. Just like in the Dutch Oralind manuscript, one of the oldest manuscripts of Northern Europe, they didn't know the year. The ancients before the Cataclysm did not count years. They counted days. And this makes sense under a vapor canopy world, because a vapor canopy at night would turn the entire mesosphere into a gigantic sky-sized magnifying glass. This is why our myths and traditions name more stars than we can actually see with the naked eye. There are constellations that in mythology have more participants. There's more stars there. But with the naked eye, we can't see them today. But those stars are there. They're 4th, 5th, they're lower than the 4th and 5th magnitude. You can't see them with the human eye. So we have this, like the Pleiades. You see 6 stars with the Pleiades, but all the myths say there's 7 stars there. And there is a 7th star there. But without magnifying the area, you wouldn't see the seventh star. So we had this corroboration between ancient legends and myths and traditions, and the fact that we have these creation scientists, because there's 4 or 5 really good books out there that you can find about vapor canopy techniques. I cite them all on my channel that I know of, about 5 of them. And the vapor canopy changes everything. They are created by volcanism. The mesosphere gets contaminated with volcanic particulates. Also with this red dust fallout from what I call the Phoenix phenomenon, which is a subject matter of it's a large piece of the puzzle in the history of the world, and it has everything to do with the unfolding of historical events, the rise and fall of empires, the vanishing of civilizations. I have whole data sets that show what academia has dated all these ancient epics and all these traditions and these lacunas between these outbreaks of literacy, where literacy explodes and then all of a sudden it's gone for 300 years. And then when it reappears, it's more mythological and silly and cartoonish, and then it's gone for another 300 years, and then Homer appears, Theognis appears, Hesiod appears, we have Works and Days and the Odyssey and the Iliad, and then Greek civilizations emerges, and we're told from the uniformitarian perspective that it's a primitive society that's becoming more and more advanced. It's not the truth. The exact opposite of the truth is how we're educated today. The real truth is that we were technologically advanced, very, very intelligent in ancient times, and we have suffered a series of systemic resets that retards development, divides us, splits us all into these factions, and we actually believe the modern version of primitive humans becoming more advanced today, when it's just the opposite. We've only become more advanced in engineering and technology in the last 250 years. But we have much evidence from the archaeological record that we've been very advanced in the past, and that something is happening periodically, a punctuated edit to our reality that keeps knocking us back down, which is the subject matter of the story of the Tower of Babel. The story of the Tower of Babel is a veiled threat. Anybody who's read it, you realize that humans came together. They're working together. No division, no strife, nothing. Humans are working together, and they realize there's a way out of here. And in working together, they realize they have discovered that there's an architectural building that is necessary for being able to bridge heaven and earth. Heaven being basically the idea of escape from the construct. The overseers in Genesis look down in the form of Elohim. It's just masked in religious garb, but in the form of Elohim, the overseers look down. They see man has become as one of us, and by virtue of his imagination, there is nothing he cannot accomplish. So the overseers realized that a unified human race working on a common goal of escaping the construct had come up with an idea to build a structure that would open some type of bridge between the world and where the overseers were. And the overseers were threatened by this, so they caused an earthquake, they caused a cataclysm, they even did some type of sophisticated edit that caused everyone to start speaking different dialects, and then it forced everybody to find others who could understand them. 70 different dialects of an original parent tongue were created, but nobody could work together anymore. The project was abandoned. So I don't know if the story's true or not, but it is a veiled threat. And implicit in that veiled threat is, yes, there is some type of technological apparatus that we can create from inside the construct. And yes, there is a way to breach the construct. But if we do it, we're going to be met with the same reset that they were met with. So when it comes to calendars, studying these calendars gave me a 360 window around each one of these mythological traditions and stories that I was able to look at. I was like, wow, this is amazing. They had computers in the pre-cataclysm world. There's no way to interpret it otherwise. Let me give you an example. So in 3113 BC, the Maya didn't even exist. The Maya didn't exist. The Maya as a culture and civilization came over 2,500 years after this. And yet, in the inception of their own culture, they were able to precisely calculate a variable involving 1,872,000 turnings of the stars. That's a shar. A single turning of the dragon is a shar. This is why ancient day count systems were called counting the dragons. I could literally tell you that I'm 18,981 dragons old. It would have meant the same thing in ancient times as it means I'm 18,981 shars old. So it's just a day count system. So before I get to the Mayan long count, I told you the king list of 241,200 shars of the king list makes perfect sense under the dragon count system of the pre-cataclysm world, the pre-flood world, the Genesis world. if every single turning of the dragon, Alpha Draconis, around the circumpolar stars is one day, because Genesis says to count a day, it's evening to morning is the first day. So the only time they reckoned time was at night. During the daytime, they didn't reckon time. It didn't even exist. You went out and did whatever you did during the daytime. But the sky watchers came back on duty at night, because at nighttime is when you could see everything. In the vapor canopy world of the pre-flood world of Genesis, during the daytime, the sun was over the mesosphere, which clouded up the mesosphere. And now that beautiful, clear lens in the sky at night, caused by cooling in the mesosphere, is no longer a lens. When the sun approaches, that entire area of the sky humidifies, and in creating that humidity in the mesosphere, that diffraction completely clouds over and the sun is not seen. This is why when the Great Flood occurred in the 241,200th Shar, which is a day, which is the 670th year of the Sumerian king list. 241,200 turnings of the stars, or days, is merely 670 years. And 670 years is very plausible when you have an 8-king dynasty. It's very plausible. In fact, the 670 years in the pre-flood dragon courts of China, the dragon kings, in their traditions, which are dated to almost the exact same time as the Hebrew and rabbinical traditions date Noah. In the Dragon King court traditions, we find that the Dragon Kings of China ruled for 646 years, and then the flood swept over the earth. When the flood swept over the earth, the ancient Western world of the Amuru, they called it the Typhon flood, which was the flood of Phoenix. It doesn't matter. That's not even relative for this to answer your question. But when the Great Flood happened, instantly the mesosphere was unable to conceal the sun. The firmament above shattered and dumped all that moisture on the world. The entire world flooded, but the entire world didn't flood. You understand? The distinction is the same as all Californians are Americans, but not all Americans are Californians. It's the same distinction here. Flooding happened all over the world, but there were whole areas that didn't suffer flooding. There are whole areas in the communities that survived. As a matter of fact, we don't have any traditions except the Semitic traditions that say that there was only one ark and that there was only a few flood survivors. Many traditions say there were fleets of ships and arks being built, knowing that the cataclysm was coming. So, when the flood happened, two ancient civilizations that both have pre-flood histories did something very unusual that actually comports with this thesis. One of them is ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt had a dynasty, the Enneads, the Ogdoad, this ancient 8-god dynasty. And all of a sudden, after over 1,000 years of having the same gods, because of a cataclysm, they had to introduce a new god. That new god was Horus, the sun. This is very unusual that we have no recognition of solar deities or anything in the most ancient Egyptian faith. It came after a cataclysm. All of a sudden the sun is the last of the gods of ancient Egypt to enter the pantheon. This is really unusual. And it wouldn't even be a data point unless it wasn't found to be true in Sumer as well, among the Sumerians. Because the Sumerian gods, their pantheon was fixed. It had been unchanged for over a millennium. And then all of a sudden, the Great Flood happens in the days of Archaix. And when Archaix gets out the boat, he has to sacrifice to a new god. And a new god was introduced into the Sumerian pantheon called Utu, later called Utu Shamash in the Akkadian. It's the sun god. The sun god makes his appearance as the very last god in the pantheon. And now another change happens. This huge change. Now all of a sudden, because of this cataclysm, the sun is empowered and the moon has lost her power. Why would the moon lose her power, which was venerated in all the goddess religions of the pre-flood world? There was no patriarchy before the pre-flood, in the pre-flood world. It was a matriarchy. It was women. Women were the divinely appointed rulers. Men were the warrior aristocracy. So this has been unchanged for a long time. But all of a sudden, the cataclysm, the day the sky fell, the great flood, the typhon event. When this happened, now at nighttime, when people looked up at the sky, the stars had lost their power. 1/3 of the power of the stars was gone. When they went out at night, it wasn't magnified in the heavens. And it looked like one of the Pleiades stars fell from heaven because you couldn't see it anymore. You can only see the 6 stars, but they were faded. Now the sky looked very different. And Orion wasn't in the place it was supposed to be. The Pleiades weren't. Arcturus wasn't. The 4 corners of heaven, the 4 royal stars, were out of sync. The lunar belt that was venerated totally different constellations as the post-cataclysm world. Now all of a sudden, the sun completely blotted out the sky during the daytime with bright light. There's nothing to see anymore. There's nothing to see. And at nighttime, everything is so far away. And the moon didn't fill a quarter of the sky anymore because the magnification effect of a condensed mesosphere wasn't there. It collapsed. That's what the Great Flood was. It was the collapse of the mesosphere. It's gone. Now, today there's a mesosphere there. All scientists will tell you there's a mesosphere there, but it's a bunch of suspended tiny water droplets, and it's lost its former. At one time, our mesosphere was just like that of Venus. If you know anything about Venus, Venus has a vapor canopy today. It's a vapor canopy world. It's supposed to be our twin world. Now, I'm not saying I buy into the model. I'm just saying that this is the geophysical model that's been presented in science for the last 200 years. That Venus is almost a replica of Earth, but it's super hot. And it has this vapor canopy that's trapping all this heat inside of it. So this is a really good picture of what our world used to be. Because during the vapor canopy world, now we understand these ancient petroglyphs. There are petroglyphs and agroglyphs that have been found all over the world that show gigantic creatures picking up people. People look like little stick men. It's because during this world, amphibians, reptiles, marsupials, and mammals grew to astonishing sizes, and so did avians. Under the high pressure of a vapor canopy world, even humans, although it took longer, grew big. The reason we know that under vapor canopy conditions everything grows much larger is because of the hyperbaric chambers that have been experimented with in Texas, in Glen Rose, Texas, and other museums that have tried to replicate vapor canopy conditions. And when they do, the earthworms, the cockroaches, whatever, the little fruit flies, they all grow twice and sometimes 3 times their normal sizes when you increase the pressure and you only allow ultraviolet light into the hyperbaric chamber, because that's what a vapor canopy would have done. The vapor canopy world by day was dark. The sun wasn't even seen. Under the vapor canopy, it was even the Native American traditions call it the dark purplish light. It was during the time of Spider Grandmother, and Spider Grandmother's webs cast across the sky held the mist in place. So this is the reason I'm mentioning all this is because it's in the study of ancient timekeeping systems of different cultures that these details come out, that we find out, because the difference between stellar systems and lunar systems is fundamental when you compare it with solar systems. Solar calendars are not like lunar calendars. And what you're looking for with the turnings of the stars is a more perfect system. But we have the Maya, who had to have had computers to be able to factor a system that used precisely 1,872,000 turnings of the stars. And yet they were able to predict with exactitude when each Bacton unfolded. Each Bacton is 144,000 days. So in 2011, my publisher released my 3rd book, which had been written 2 years earlier. But in 2011, he had to release it before 2012, because in my book, Anunnaki Homeworld, which is still available on Amazon and Booktree, I had 2 whole chapters on the Mayan long count, trying to educate people that these 200 books you guys are all reading from all these famous authors about the Mayan long count are garbage. Every single one of these authors is assuming that the Mayan long count ends in 2012 based off research mistakes that were conducted in 1952 by 2 Mesoamerican archaeologists who were not chronologists, and they did not understand what they were looking at. And no one has even gone. Even Jose Archaix, where the time in the technosphere, the Mayan factor, he was super famous in 2007, 2008. The dude sold millions of copies of his books, and it was complete 100% misinformation. So in my book, I showed how you break it down. 1,872,000 days divided by 13 Mayan epics called Bactans are 144,000 days each. The Maya only knew a Shar count system. Luna-solar is their factoring. They only knew a year of 360 days for almost half of the calendar. Then something terrible happened. The day the sky changed has to be factored in there. So in my book, I show the research of Hans Bellamy, of many ancient chronographers from the 16 and 1700s that talk about this event. Because anybody who studies calendars must factor in this event, or all their calculations are going to be wrong. And the event is very simple. But in the year 713 BC, the biblical material has it in the reign of Hezekiah, and the prophet of the court was Isaiah. And Isaiah had walked across the ancient court of a previous king named Ahaz, and the sundial on Ahaz not only stopped, but it retrograded 10 degrees. So the shadow going back 10 degrees, and it said that the sun stopped in the sky and the sun moved backwards 10 degrees. Okay. This is not an insignificant event, especially considering the fact that in the days of Herodotus, when he wrote about the Egyptians specifically said that they do not trust the sun. The sun has deviated from its course 4 times. Therefore, they do not use the sun as a way of factoring time. And this is another problem with a modern Egyptology. They still use the sun count systems. The Egyptians did not. This is also why Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson, and a whole host of other people like Jimmy Corsetti and Matthew LaCroix and so many other researchers out there in the field are pushing an Atlantis date in the Younger Dryas period. And they simply do it by ignoring 41 chronographical data points that put the Atlantis story in the 13th century BC, destroyed in a Phoenix cataclysm in 1135 BC. It's perfectly there. The story of Atlantis is true. The players are all known to archaeologists. It's the Sea Peoples Federation invasions. All the players are there. The history is there, but they're all claiming that Plato is correct when he said 9,000 years before Ceylon. However, in my own research, I go into the Egyptian Sais priesthood and I show where they would never have recognized the sun as anything to trust. And that the Sais priesthood was a goddess venerating priesthood. And in Sais, in the mansion of the Phoenix, at the temple of the Ben, they specifically used the moon to count time. And in the ancient Egyptian systems, and I cite you would not believe, Will, how many ancient authors corrected Plato, and they have to all be ignored. This is why I have called Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson, Matt LaCroix, so many of them, Jimmy Corsetti. I've called Billy Carson, so many of these guys, I have called them out to debate this, and none of them will meet me. None of them. I have freely published all this data for the public. I'm not holding back. I give out my data for free in PDFs in my videos that you can download. And you can see the whole list of ancient authors that all said the 9,000 years was 9,000 moons. The years were 30 days each. This puts Atlantis in the 13th century BC, where it has to be. It has to be there because the whole Atlantis story is about invaders coming from the Atlantic area and attacking Athens. It has to be because in the archaeological record we know for a fact 1345 BC, give or take a year, 1345 is the founding of Athens by Cecrops. So Athens didn't exist in the Ice Age. The whole idea is it's got to be deliberate misinformation. Nobody can just make these mistakes and then not correct them. So it's studying calendars allowed me to see that the Maya knew exactly what they were doing. And the Mayan long count never ended in 2012. It ends in 2046. And that changes everything because you have to factor in the fact that after 713 BC, when the sun retarded in its course, every single civilization, priesthood, culture, everyone in the world within 50 years had changed their calendars from 360 days a year, the lunisolar calendar, to 365 or 365.24. Every single one. And I have another data set free to the public where I publish the entire list all around the world of everybody who had to change their calendars because of this. And when you factor the Mayan long counts, 1,872,000 turnings of the stars, the end of the long count could never be 2012. It has to be 2046. So when we talk about what year it is today, 2025, Anno Domini, year of our Lord, this is another huge piece of the puzzle that very few people realize. You're living in a lie. The lie was created by the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican. The reason they created this lie was because there is a cycle of history based off the Phoenix that they desperately wanted to hide. The last time that the Phoenix virtually destroyed the entire world and pretty much killed 90% of humanity, leaving us back to square one. It was like an Adam and Eve reset all over again. And this is the story of Genesis as well. The first total systemic reset is Genesis 1. And many authors and researchers in the 1700s and 1800s knew that the story of Adam and Eve and Genesis, the serpent and the tree, was a reset story. When mankind was told to be fruitful, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth, the divine command. The reason is because an entire technologically advanced golden age civilization had just been wiped off the map so perfectly in a cataclysm that the survivors were naked. Hence Adam and Eve in the garden. And not only were they naked, but the destruction was so perfect that they thought it was a new heavens and a new earth. So this is the story of Adam and Eve. It's even the subject matter of a CIA document about the Adam and Eve reset. It's a real popular CIA document, a book that was written in the 1950s. The guy got some chronographical material completely off, but conceptually his book nailed it. Adam and Eve's story of Genesis is absolutely a reset story. But in the historical record, as I've shown many times, that date is 3895 BC. It is not a date that I invented. It is one that I show from many other researchers and how they derive that date from the Book of Jasher, Book of Jubilees, studying the Old Testament, the rabbinical records, Talmudic records, especially the Assyrian eponyms. So how these different chronologists came up with this date, 3895 BC, is amazing. And then it's corroborated in so many other ways. And this was year one of the pre-flood world. And in Genesis, the pre-flood world is 1,656 years, which is a very curious number because it's divisible by 138. And we have all these traditions from the ancient world that these periodic resets were happening every 138 years. So this is also the subject matter of my channel, showing the public what happened every 138 years for 58 centuries. So showing the source material, showing exactly what happened, and it's happened with such precision and regularity that we are able to easily extrapolate the next visitation of the Phoenix, which is going to be in the month of May, the year 2040, which is precisely what Nostradamus says in his centuries. That's a whole nother subject, man. We can get into that later, but there's been a French scholar who discovered a date index to Nostradamus, and it changes everything. It shows that Nostradamus cleverly hid by putting false astrology in his deal. He wanted the surface level. He wanted the church. If the church officials came into contact with the centuries, he wanted them to be able to look at it and think that it was veiled in astrology, because the astrology's crap. It's all codes for other things in Nostradamus. And this guy, Mario Reading, a French scholar, he discovered the date index. And it's amazing, because everything Nostradamus, according to this date index, claims is going to happen in the month of May of the year 2040 perfectly mirrors every other time Phoenix has appeared and caused a reset. It's amazing. So this the study of calendars, we are in the year 5,919 right now, Anno Mundi, which is the 3895 BC Adam and Eve reset, total systemic reset. So it's been 5,919 years since that epic destruction of a technologically advanced civilization. We have never been that advanced since, but we have gone through history, ups and downs of resets, but we haven't been. You can imagine it this way. Imagine that just suspension of disbelief. Imagine that everything you've been told about your world is wrong. Imagine that you are an immortal being stuck borrowing a piece of the construct that you call an avatar. But the avatar is not you. This avatar belongs to the construct. You have to use it in order to experience things in the construct. But the body belongs to the construct itself. It's not yours. You are not your body. You are something else inside a highly individualized immortal soul wearing the skin of the construct to enjoy the construct. The construct itself has fixed historical programming. That fixed historical programming never changes no matter how many times, how many avatars, how many incarnations you live through the programming. And because there's so many different coordinates and so many different identities that you can be, you can live through the programming thousands of times and each time learn something new. And the construct, every time you're living between avatars, can put you at different coordinates in different time periods. You don't have to live sequentially. It can put you in Sumer, in Babylon, Akkad. You could be on a slave ship in ancient Carthage. It doesn't matter. It puts you wherever it needs to put you for you to learn as an immortal everything you need. So all this constructual programming is fixed in the field. It's not going to change. You're not here to save the world. You're here to grow and learn as an immortal. This is what the study of calendars has done for me. It showed me that we're looking at codified protocols. We're not looking at anything. We're not looking at something that actually happened. We're looking at programming. So in this programming, the highly individualized soul has free reign to do and be whatever it wants in its incarnations, in its avatars. And you're given hundreds of chances to do it, to build lives, do whatever you want to do. And every single time that you exit an avatar, you are born back into another one. It may not be the same year. It may not. Although there are many studies that indicate that some souls immediately come back, because little kids that are interviewed in neighborhoods often have exact memories from the perspective of 70, 80, and 90-year-olds of their neighbors, as if they just came from that house right there. But all their memories as an 8-year-old are from the perspective of an 80-year-old who passed away in a house across the street. So we have a lot of stuff like that. Keep it, it's highly local. So. But that doesn't mean all of them have to be. So this being the year 5,919 in the coding merely means we're getting closer and closer to the year 6,000. There was a belief in ancient times that history is a 6,000-year construct. So these calendars from the ancient world are far more sophisticated than we've given them credit for, like the Mayan long count, this exact day count system, and this fixation with the Maya. Because I don't know if you know this, Will, but in all the Mayan cities, they had these steels. There's a steel for every year, We haven't found them all, but there's a stele for every year when the Sky Watchers came together, and in Mayan glyphs on the stele, they would record what year it is. They would record what Bacton, what Uinal, it's like 7 different things. Aha, Uinal, Bacton, whatever. They recorded meticulously, and they would go down and record the main star patterns of the sky and what significant events or new laws, legislation. These were public steles for the public to always know when they were, because the Maya had a fascination about time, because the prophecy attached to the Mayan calendar was about when the final Bacton was done and the 1,872nd day was over, time itself would collapse. That's merely a belief that the time-keeping systems we have today are going to change. Well, this is precisely what we see in the book of Revelation in the second and third trumpet. It's exactly, because in the second and third trumpet, it specifically says that God is going to remove 1/3 of the day, 1/3 of the night, 1/3 of the stars, 1/3 of the sun, 1/3 of the moon. Well, if you're going to remove 1/3 of the day and 1/3 of the night, you can explain that as the return of a vapor canopy, or the return of volcanism clouding up the skies with pumice and ash. But if you're going to be highly specific and say 1/3 of the day, 1/3 of the night, 1/3 of the sun, 1/3 of the moon, 1/3 of the stars, then it seems to be that you're talking about reducing the day to 16 hours from 24 and reducing the year from 365 to 243. This is the accurate interpretation, because what follows in the book of Revelation, in the narrative, is that suddenly the dragon becomes wroth because he learns that his time has grown short. And it's also corroborated in the words of Jesus, where he specifically says that in his prophecies that in the last days, time will be shortened, and this is done to keep them from the evil to come, because unless time is shortened, no flesh would be saved. So we have multiple corroborations that this is the actual interpretation of the matter, and that time is going to collapse. And the Maya date that at 2046. This is profound, because that's 6 years after the Phoenix returns in 2040. And according to the Revelation, we have 2 back-to-back cataclysms. That's all the book of Revelation is about. It's 2 back-to-back. Everything else is dressing. And on my channel, using the Greek, I show a complete analysis, removing all Judeo-Christian additions to the original Sibylline prophecy. You can remove them all, and you're left with 2 cataclysms in the book of Revelation. And they spread 2 of them out between seals and seals and trumpets and bowls of wrath. But the Judeo-Christian rewriting of the Sibylline oracle had actually separated all that into individual acts. But when you remove all the Judeo-Christian dressing, you're left with 2 epic cataclysms that happen back to back. I show the original Sibylline prophecy, and there it is. It's red. It's column in column. It looks just like the book of Revelation on my channel. Then I show Mother Shipton's prophecy from 550 years ago, and she says the same thing. In the last days, 2 sky dragons will come back to back. Oceans will slip their basins. Cities of the world will fall. Total systemic reset. She perfectly nailed it. She was unlettered, illiterate, and she was just considered a healer. But she had this prophecy, this dream, and it was rendered into a poem called Mother Shipton's Prophecy. I am not talking about the 1800s version where somebody came in there and added a whole bunch of things she never prophesied. I'm talking about her core prophecy was only about the return of the 2 sky dragons. Then we have Nostradamus. In the date index of Nostradamus, not only does he talk about the return of the Phoenix, but he says that a second cataclysm will quickly follow the first one, and it will be far more terrible. Nostradamus date index precisely dates these at 2040, and then the worst one at 2046. I didn't make up any of these dates. All I did was bring these to the public's attention, that all this research corroborates each other. So we're now living a lie, the year 2025. The lie developed by the Roman Catholic Church through an agent named Dionysius Exiguus. So Dionysius Exiguus was an agent of the Vatican. history books try to wash over this, just talking about he developed a new calendar called the Anno Domini calendar. He was commissioned by the church to do it because they wanted to factor in when was Jesus born, and let's start the new Christian calendar. This was in 526 AD. This means 528 years after Jesus was born, they decided to introduce a new calendar. Up until this time, it was the Byzantine calendar and the Julian calendar, the Saka calendar, the Christian Coptic calendar, what is it? The old Buddhist calendar. All these calendrical systems were used by different peoples. There was nothing unified. But in 526, this guy, an agent of the church, who also wrote a church history and Chronicles and all that, and he invented the Year of the Lord, Anno Domini calendar. And in one of my videos, I show, because it's just unbelievable, I can't tell people about it, I have to show them. But I show them the research of Alexander Del Mar from the year 1900, and I show the actual pages where it shows they created the Anno Domini calendar to hide the Phoenix timeline. The Phoenix timeline is the reset timeline. It's all admitted. Every bit of it's admitted, and we also have to judge things by their effects. It's exactly what happened. Having us on this new Anno Domini calendar has completely blinded the present world from a calendar the ancients knew of, the Phoenix Chronology. And they knew it was such predictive value. The Phoenix has been predicted, as I've shown on my channel, the Phoenix has been predicted multiple times throughout history. They knew exactly when it was going to come. And for those who don't understand what the Phoenix phenomenon is, it's great. It's crazy. I know this sounds like the stuff of science fiction, but it is so well documented. I still have no takers for debates, and I've been calling people out for debates for 4 years now on this data. But every 138 years, there is an editing to our reality. This editing changes cultures, language, music, companies. It changes things in cities. It makes all these changes to hide different aspects from the people that are living of the day. Sometimes people are aware of the changes, and because the rest of the population thinks they're insane, they end up in insane asylums. They end up ostracized from society, where they have to shut up and just not talk about what they saw. And there's artwork and there's paintings. There's some of the most famous paintings you know of. When you take the Phoenix phenomenon into account, you're going to realize why. Like the Screaming Man. Have you ever seen the painting of the Screaming Man? He's on that bridge. His face looks like a contorted yellow. I have it right here. Hold on.
We'll throw it up.
From the 1800s.
Oh, okay. Ah, I see it now. I see it.
Okay,
Yeah.
this is a parody, because that's not the original face. The original face is painted. It's like an alien head, but it shows somebody.
I see it.
This is right around 1902, which was a Phoenix year. But this is a famous painting, and it's never been adequately described. But the Phoenix phenomenon are edits that happen to our reality as we are living it. The edits almost go unnoticed by the general public, simply because something darkens the sun for about a 2-hour period. The moon turns blood red. All over the world in different areas, red dust, red rain, red mud falls depending upon the local humidities. It was so well documented in 1902. I have like 6 videos on 1902 just to cover. And I'm still not done with 1902. I have a lot more new stuff people have been sending me from all over the world about 1902. So it doesn't mean it's a world destruction. It's an editing process. Every 138 years, something's editing, but it's covering up the edits with these destructive cataclysmic episodes. 1902 wasn't even a bad one. We have a lot of data from 1902, but it wasn't a bad one. 1764 before that was a little worse. We have a lot of data on that. 2040 is going to be epic. It's going to be epic. These things happen to unfold in series. They build in magnitude until there's a massive release, like what's going to come out in 2040, and then it goes back. And it builds again every 138 years it builds. So there's been theories. The other researchers have gone through my data, and they come up with a theory that maybe the sun is like a battery, and that all this red fallout that comes from the sky is some type of shedding coming from the sun, and then it renews itself, because that's the legend of the phoenix. The legend of the phoenix is a winged bird flies into the sun dies, then the sun is reborn, revigorated as a young man again, and then for a period of time the sun gets old, then it shed, because that's exactly what the legend of the phoenix was about. The legend of the phoenix has red blood rains hitting the earth when the phoenix appears. In some ancient traditions, when the phoenix appeared in the sky, it rained cinnamon. What is cinnamon? Cinnamon is a spice everybody knows. It's a red spice that everybody knows, a real fine dust coming from the sky. But it's just tradition and culture, because the older traditions wouldn't have said cinnamon, they would have said cinnabar. It would have been a red mineral type substance that was falling from the sky. So anyway, our modern day calendar, Anno Domini, was specifically designed by the church to control information. The information they wanted to control was the reset timeline. This is the information they wanted to control the best. And the best way to do it was to invent a calendar that it covered over 5 centuries. You got to understand, the calendar we're on today started in 526. It wasn't even accepted by most of Europe till the 900s. It took 300 years for this calendar to even be accepted. Most people were still living by different timekeeping systems. So finally, the church got everybody to accept it. In the days of Isaac Newton, the calendar had, just around Isaac Newton's time, been accepted by all of Europe. That's how long it took for the Anno Domini, the calendar we're on today.
Can I ask about what role does the oracles, what do they play? Because I've seen you speak about this, and I've recently read a couple books referencing the oracles, and of which many, of course, know the oracle at Delphi, or Delphi, however it's pronounced, and Siwa in Egypt, right? The one that Alexander is purported to have visited. And the way you talk about them isn't necessarily the way that they're portrayed, right? I mean, they're portrayed with these women who are potentially either in altered states of consciousness, with an ability to tap into, let's say, whatever, through their altered state of consciousness, able to tap into some knowledge, some sort of something that's giving them some ability to discuss what's going to happen, what the best ways of things to happen, whether it's the Akashic records of something like this. And the way that you, at least I've seen you describe them as more as interconnected and not necessarily mystic or mystical in their nature. Could you explain what role they had? I mean, I know we only have about 13, 15 minutes, but could you explain the role of these?
Yeah, we can go. Check this out. 2 different scenarios do not negate each other. Just because there is a narrative that they were given mushrooms in theogens, they were given psychogenics, they were given these females called the Pythonesses, these priestesses were given these drugs. People, were filtered. They were ushered into the court of the Sibyls, and they could see these girls were in states of ecstasy. Sometimes it was very sexual. Most of the time they were naked. They would have these non-venomous pythons and anacondas stuff. Well, I don't know about anacondas, but pythons would be out there, and yes. What you're saying is absolutely true, but it's paramount to understanding the mechanics of a psyop. So on my channel, I go through many different historical narratives, and I show you how it was really a psyop, like the whole Prester John psyop of the church, where they needed to to instill bravery and hope in the Crusaders, because they needed the wealth of the Crusaders. The church needed their wealth, and they can't send them off to Muslim battlefields to die so they can confiscate their stuff and accuse their wives and daughters of witchery so they can nullify their land contracts and get all that too. It's a land grab. Most people don't know the Crusades were a land grab. The Vatican didn't care if we had Jerusalem or not. It cared that all these rich knights and all that went and took all their household with them and left these women back here to fend for themselves, and the Vatican went there and scooped up all their properties and all that stuff. This is what it was. It was a psyop. In order to perpetuate the psyop, they created the Prester John myth. And the Prester John myth was that the Crusaders had an ally in India, a Christian emperor named Prester John. And Prester John was, if we made a big enough effort and sent enough armies to Jerusalem, Prester John would come and help us, and we would just wipe out the Muslim hordes. This was the idea, and it went on for centuries. It was a psyop. So when it comes to the oracles, yes, from the oracles in Egypt, the ancient oracles of Ionia, Didyma, we got Didyma, Dodona, Didyma, in Greece, Delphi. We have these ancient oracles, and yes, they did take their females from northern Egypt. Northern Egypt provided the oracular priestesses. This gave them a foreign element, something that people in Greece would have been very impressed with. Oh, here's a chick from Northern Africa. Her accent is different. She looks slightly different. There's a mystique about her. She wasn't allowed to engage with the general public. She lived in a lap of luxury in the temple complex. So, yes, what you're saying is true. The drugs were used. The females were real. But all that was staging. I came into contact with an old book. I have books on military. Here's what a lot of people don't know too. The U.S. military, going back to the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, has books analyzing history, and I have them in my library. I have showed them on my channel. But the U.S. military, published by the Department of Defense, has military historians that have gone through meticulously all these different stories in the ancient world, and they add details that you wouldn't believe. Things that and they take the magic out of history. They show things that are incredible. And one of the things they showed, and I've shared this on my channel, and a book somewhere here on my shelf. I have a military historian's research on the Oracle of Delphi and what he found out. It's amazing.
What's his name? Do you know?
I'm gonna have to find it. I've got two videos
Later.
on my channel about the Greek oracles, and it's in one of those videos.
All right.
But
We'll link to it.
he's it was astonishing when I read his comments about the intelligence network that was set up in the days of the oracles, and how these ships were all over the Mediterranean world. In the ancient world, all news traveled by ship. It was the fastest thing. It only took you 23 days to get on a ship from Jerusalem to Rome. It didn't take long. So it's it took 3 days to go from Rome to Carthage. Terrible enemies, just 3 days. Matter of fact, Cato the Censor gave a famous speech which started the Second Carthaginian War, behind holding up figs. And he held figs up before the Senate and started eating the figs and told the senators how delicious and fresh these figs are. And when he was done eating the figs, he wiped his mouth. He says, "These figs were plucked ripe from Carthage, our blood enemy, just 3 days ago." That's how close our doom is upon us if we don't do something. And as soon as they heard that speech, Rome launched the fleets and attacked Carthage in the second Punic War. So news traveled super fast. Ships were fast. Not only that, but once a ship hit land, there were already runners in place. There was already money in place. When ships came in, there were already agents of the oracles. Agents of the oracles were already there waiting. And when ships came in, they got the news, they got the dispatch, but they didn't just get news from abroad. They've got highly protected, I don't know if it was chests, I don't know if it was vellum scrolls. They got materials that was packed with intelligence from oracles across the sea. From Egypt, from Canaan, Phoenicia, and from Ionia. At the same time, when ships left ancient Greece, the Delphic Oracle would send its dispatch of all the intelligence. And this is how the intelligence was gathered. Because here's what almost 99.9% of the people that listen to these stories about the oracles don't know. But we have, by the authority of Herodotus, Plutarch, Strabo, Pliny, and many other ancient authors, Diodorus Siculus, they told us the mechanics of the operation. They told us how these things worked. And when you came to an oracle, they put you on hold for 2 weeks to 6 months. Your emissaries would camp out. Every single oracle had these campgrounds, and you would camp out because you never knew. You never knew when you were going to be summoned into the temple of the oracle. It could be 2 weeks, it could be 2 months. Give you an example. If you went to the oracle of Dodona in Ionia, and you went to that oracle and you said, "Hey, I'm doing business with somebody in Boeotia. This is Greece. I'm doing business with somebody in Boeotia. He's already sent me 2 payments, but he owes me 2 more payments. I don't know if I want to send him the whole fleet." He's demanding the whole fleet of ships. He's only paid me half, and I really don't know, but I need this money, and I need to know if he's a trustworthy guy, whatever. So people use the oracles for business stuff about 90% of the time. It was all corporate and business stuff is what the oracles were used for. So the oracle of Dodona would take this information from the person and say, "We will have your answer as soon as a Pythoness receives word from Apollo. We will have your answer." And they would give their gifts to the oracle, and they would camp. And sometimes they'd be there 2 weeks, sometimes they would be there 6 months, but it only took 20 days to get word to Boeotia. And to the oracle of Boeotia. Now, the dispatch would go from oracle to oracle because it's the oracles that had all the intelligence, because each oracle was an intelligence center and they had information on everybody, and they would have known exactly what kind of guy this is. And if not, they would have put the information out there. They would have sent runners out to ask their agents in Boeotia, "Hey, this dude right here is in a business arrangement trying to buy these ships over here. What's his business history? What's his finances look like right now? Does it look like he's able to pay this guy? He's making demands." And they would find this information out, and the information would get back to the oracle, and they would find out he's already burned two other companies overseas. He has an archer guild trying to kill him. He's got a contract on his life in Hittite Anatolia, and this tells the oracle that, oh, this dude is no good. So they would send on the next dispatch, which was daily. Every day ships were coming and going. The next dispatch would go back, and here it is 25 days later. This guy, the oracle, has an answer. On the 26th day, they call him in there, and he sees the routine. Oh, the girl's foaming at the mouth. She's butt naked. He can't tell if she's unconscious or having an orgasm. He can't tell. She's just doing her role. It's a drugged up female. And there's a priest right there, and she's mumbling and murmuring, and he's interpreting it, and the person visiting the oracle falls for it hook, line, and sinker. Because the person listening to this now gets detailed, specific information, and he knows the oracle is telling the truth. And he thinks that the priest interpreted this detailed, specific deal from the mumblings of the Pythoness. But it's not. He was already briefed what to tell the guy. So when he comes in on the 25th day and he's told the oracle, Apollo has visited the Pythoness and has found blessing with your question. We will provide you the answer. And he'll go in there and he'll listen in. He'll see the setup, and he'll hear that this guy, this is the full guy. Here's his first name, middle name, last name. Here's who he's married to. He's the son of something. They would overwhelm him with correct information, so that when they slipped in that the Pythoness sees empty coffers. It just gives them a riddle, gives them a whole riddle that's easy to interpret, that makes it sound like it's coming to Apollo, but he gets the gist. And the gist is you lost that 50% of the money you sent to him because he's dishonorable and he has no intention of fulfilling his contract, and do not send him those ships. You will be burned. This is how the oracles ran for almost 800, 900 years. They were intelligence operations. And what gives it away to the military historians is the fact that is the ancient Greek authors all explained the waiting process. You were forced to wait for your answer. The reason for the wait was because the gods aren't accessible every day. They're only accessible every once in a while, and it's not up to us mortals. It's up to the gods. So when the oracles open their doors to give out answers, everybody would see. It might be 15, 20 guys that have been all camped out that all go in, and everybody realizes they've all been waiting for different periods of time because that's all it took to get their answer. But then everybody else is forced to wait another 7, 8, 9 days before the oracle opens its doors. It only conducted its business in crowds. It didn't do it every single day because that would have given away the lie. So this is it was very sophisticated what they were doing back then. It was very sophisticated.
It's fascinating because I'm continuing to read. I'm actually reading Arian. I haven't finished it yet, and detailing obviously Alexander's life.
You have to, Will. You have to understand. This operation had to be so sophisticated they even had to fool kings. You follow me? They had to fool courts and kings. So this is no different. This is no different than in the medieval to Renaissance period when these certain individuals, we're not going to name them, but certain individuals were really good at manipulating finances. So they created some bull crap narrative that got all the intelligentsia of Europe on fire. And they released all these awesome charts and diagrams and grimoires. And this was born the alchemical literature. And on my channel, I got several videos breaking down the symbolism and the alchemy and all and what it was. And this whole idea of the base transmutation of base lead to gold. And listen, it was all BS. It was all cover. The whole alchemy deal was all cover because these certain individuals were moving money and they were siphoning wealth out of the European countries back to the Middle East and back to Persia, to what was called the ethnarchs of this culture. And they were siphoning all this wealth away, but they had the European courts on fire about alchemy. So when every once in a while, to explain their wealth, because the Europeans themselves didn't understand. Their economies were faltering, but they didn't understand that these members of the court who were of a different ethnicity living among the Europeans were so wealthy. How did y'all get all this money and we're barely making it? And they didn't realize that they're stealing it from you. They got all kinds of little scams going on. So what they would do in the alchemy is every once in a while a king would demand proof of alchemy. So they would do a little scientific lab experiment and all that, but they already had the lead weights and the lead and the gold of equal weight already prepared. And they would do these elaborate deals and they would show chemicals and they would turn around and they would turn lead, which they would hide in a special contraption in a box or something, and then out would pop in their little smelting device some really, really, really hot gold. And they would let it cool off, and it was all very persuasive, but these people were stealing wealth from Europe for like 800 years. But the cover was all this zodiacal and alchemy BS that they had foisted on the intelligentsia, who actually thought that there was something here, and there wasn't. It too was a psyop. Yeah, man, people hate my channel because I take the magic out of history a lot. They hate my channel. Listen, there's about 20 different YouTube channels networked against me. They're always hating on me, and all I'm doing is freely giving away all this historical information because I'm just passionate about dividing fact from fiction. I love history.
I feel your passion. I feel it. I actually, we've had a debate we've had a debate between, I don't know what to call it. You've mentioned Matt LaCroix. We've had on Billy. We've had on people, but I facilitated a debate between Matt LaCroix and John F. White. I'm not sure if you're familiar with John F. White's work. He does a lot of work with mythology. You check him out after, and you'll see he's a very interesting guy. And I would love to moderate a debate between you and someone who would be willing to put forth whatever it is that they feel that you feel that they have gotten wrong, or they feel that you've gotten wrong, because I think that it would actually be incredible. And so I'm going to go look. That's going to be a little homework for our team here. to see who would be up for it, because I think it would be epic, especially if we can get enough time for it. But before we end, I wanted to ask one thing that I've not seen that you just barely touched on, and I don't think anybody's really talked about this, and I have not seen you talk about it because you're just generally presenting your information. But you mentioned that one of the things you did when you were in prison, obviously with all the research and the papers and the things that you had that you were writing down, right, in order to get them out, to make sure that you solidified your knowledge. I want to know, because you seem to be incredibly, I mean, you are clearly very well read, but you're also very good at presenting your knowledge and assimilating that knowledge, connecting it to other forms of knowledge. You mentioned that if you write something down, it kind of becomes a part of you in a certain sense. So could you give me how you read, learn, and then what do? Do you read a few books and then write your notes on them? What is your hope? Do you go in with a goal before reading these books? Give me an idea of how you learn and how you assimilate knowledge, because I think you've probably done a very good job at it.
Okay, let's see here. All right, what's this right here? Let me show you real quick. This is a compendious history of New England, published in 1809. That's what this book is right here. So, this book is too old for me to mark up, but all my new books that I order from Amazon and all that, I mark those up with a mechanical pencil, just a little mechanical pencil. I make little side notes of the things that I'm going to write down. So, in reading this book, I'm always going to write down on a piece of paper the title, the author, the date of publication, and the publisher. One of my videos shows a list of 1,300 nonfiction reference books that I read when I was in prison, just to show the public, look, these are the books that you can question me on. I've read every one of these. I've got them. I know them. This is my core foundational source material. Now, that list has grown quite a bit in the 8 years I've been out of prison. But when I go through a book, there may be 17, 18, 19, 20, 72 pages that are just generally interesting to me, but there's nothing I really want to data mine. Then I hit a section where they're talking about a subject matter or of interest to me, but I don't know where I'm going to fit it in. I don't read books just to find what interests me right then and there. I see what's valuable in different contexts, and I'll write it down and preserve it. And I may not open that folder up for 2 or 3 years. And then I'll find that note and say, wow, I need this right here for this. I have research files that you would not believe. I have people that have visited my property, and they have gone through on YouTube and showed everybody my research notes. And I have 3-ring binders just packed full of all these notes. A lot of them are still unorganized. I'm still in the organization process. I have not organized all those notes. I do have a book that I wrote that's 1,055 pages in small print called Chronicles, which puts 41 different ancient and modern calendars all into sequential order in a year-by-year chronology of the last 6,000 years. So I do have a book called Chronicles that does that. It has the majority of my research data in there, but not all of it. It's just impossible. I never stop. So I read one book. I may find 5 or 6 gems in here that I put on a piece of paper. Then that piece of paper that has those 6 or 7 gems from this book and the author, title, and all that, date of publication, gets put in a file. And then about once a year, I go through my files and I look at everything, and I'll put together videos, thesis, start condensing notes according to subject matter, what goes together. Because in the filing system, it's all random. It all goes by books. And there might be 6 or 7 different subjects that I pull out of one single book. There may be some books that I pull out 200 data points. There have been times like I read Technics and Civilization. I can't remember the name of the author. But a guy wrote Technics and Civilization in like 1921. Absolutely boring book. I've talked about it on YouTube because there was one single data point that was astonishing, and it fit perfectly with other things I was talking about. So every book has its value, but some are more valuable than others.
Lewis Mumford.
But when you write something down, it's fundamentally different than typing it. Typing something on a keyboard is abstract. We already process information in the abstract. So typing information in the abstract does nothing for memory. This is why court stenographers can sit there and listen to an entire court proceeding, type everything, and then an hour later be asked about anything in that court proceeding and know nothing. They are not processing information. All they're doing is relaying it. This is what you do with keyboards. So if you really want to learn something, it's one of my favorite pens right here. If you really want to learn something, you got to write it down. And in prison, I didn't just write down the information out of books. I filed it away, read 20, 30 books, and then organized all that. I had to write it a second time. When I wrote it a second time, now it's in some type of organization. Then, the third time I came in contact with my material, it's with an old mechanical prison typewriter. That's the third time. I've already written it down twice. Now I'm looking at the data and I'm trying to fit it in more. The third time that it's processed through me is now in some type of order. Once those pages were typed, I indexed them, stacked them up, and then about once a year, I'd send a bag about this big home. And when I got out, there was 26, 27 bags in my attic waiting for me to go through. So that's how I do it. You got to understand, if you want to memorize anything, if you want information to be yours, then you got to write it down, because writing is using your avatar, which belongs to the field. You are borrowing this avatar to do something that's coming not from the field, not from the construct, and not from your avatar. What's coming out of that ink onto that paper is coming from you. This is this is you. This is how you transmute things that are spiritual, which are born of thought, into the materium, which is the construct. Only way to do that's through writing. It's the only way to do it. So it becomes you. Well, what you put on that paper, it becomes you, and you're able to relate that. And the reason I have this recall, the reason I have this ability to pull all this information from the field isn't because of memory. I teach that on my channel. Information is not stored in the brain. The brain is a filter, and information is in the field. But in order to tap back into the field and to be in resonant with what you have already put into the field, you got to write it down, because typing things does not help you remember anything.
Right. Yeah, I've noticed that. I mean, it's clear, when I read my actual books, and I do read, I love to read myself. It's very clear the difference between reading something on a tablet, reading on your whatever iPhone, which is a disaster, in that sense, even as opposed to the computer. It's ridiculous, but fascinating the way that you do this. Jason, listen, we are going to have to. I mean, I know 90 minutes is no way to get the best out of you. But, one of these times we'll have to do something in person, that's for sure. But in the meantime, I will go out and look to see if we can't because I think a debate with you involved would be epic for all of your fans and all the people who are interested in these subjects. And so we're going to try and do more of that. So if you'd be up for it, that would be the next thing that my team would hunt down. Even if it's out of the mention of the people.
Liz, I'm 100%. I'm on board.
Okay.
I'm on board.
Okay.
There's only one thing that has to be covered, and that's rules of engagement. And what I mean is, this is what I mean. This is what I mean. I've got a lot of peons that have never brought value to the field. I'm talking about people who have no professional standing, no professional accomplishments. No one knows who they are. Calling me out to debate is nothing but just trying to get some airtime. I'm looking for somebody who is qualified. I have many qualifications.
Right.
I have many professional accomplishments. I'm looking for somebody there. You may not find somebody equally qualified, but if there's somebody who claims to be a specialist in a certain field, and it's a field that I'm calling bullshit on, I don't care what their credentials are. I am 100% on board with debating them.
Okay. Then I love it. Yeah, we're going to go high profile. I mean, I think that's the way, and I think that's what the people are craving. I mean, that's what we're here behind the scenes trying to learn from you guys that are delving so deep into this sort of knowledge, so that we can glean something, about the madness.
Oh yeah, I will be on my best behavior, absolutely professional. My channel is my channel, so I get to act the way I want to act. You understand? I'm able to humor, gratify. I'm able to educate. I'm able to entertain my community. But when it comes to what you're talking about, being hosted on another channel, yeah, I'm not just going to bring my A game, but I'm also going to be very, very polite. And even if I disagree with somebody, I'm not going to belittle them for that. I'm just going to correct them. I'm going to correct the misinformation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, Jason, listen, guys, we will link obviously to the tons of books, the tons of information, the YouTube channel. Is there a website that we can link to?
Truth be told, archaix.com is massive, and it will take you everywhere you need to go in the Archaix Empire. That's it. Just archaix.com.
Perfect. Guys, we'll link to everything. Jason, once again, thank you. We will obviously be in touch here soon to sort something out.
Awesome. Sounds good.